I don't mean to spam, but I'd love an answer to why I can't handle hardly any volume, but I still grow at least decently. 2 direct sets once a week, mostly. High stimulus to fatigue ratio, lots of isolation. I mean, you volume is like work is still gonna make you grow. That's you probably are just very precise with your training, probably have very good technique, and you push yourself extremely hard. Um, I wouldn't recommend it for most people, but you're probably just good at lifting. That if anything, that's a good thing because it gives you more room to add stuff in if you need to.
Is he right? Am I really that good at lifting? It's not a conclusion I'm comfortable coming to, only as a last resort. It's incredibly risky to think that way because, as they say, no one tells the pretty girl she has terrible breath. You can't give up looking critically at what you do unless you want to stop improving and risk regression. I have been trying to figure out volume and intensity for about as long as I've been lifting. I've had many theories about them, and in the beginning, I would do like 3 sets to failure twice a week. Um, at this point, I was only doing a few exercises, not training my whole body. Recovery was not a problem yet. The weights were, of course, also very light. My form was also so terrible that I developed a shoulder asymmetry that's still around today. I was mocked for not having any shoulder development and told I shouldn't always go to failure. I learned about RPE and trained mainly at RPE 8 for a long time. Within 3 to 5 months, I was training most of my body to some extent, and I was rarely training to failure. Until early 2024, I considered my training to be power building. I would start out with mechanically advantaged compound movements and pursue strength on these as my main mode of progression. Then I would often do another compound movement related to the main movement of the day. Indeed, I trained in movements and thought of them as primary and secondary. For example, on July 31st, 2022, I performed 3 sets of deadlifts, 3 sets of dumbbell rows, and then 3 sets of belt squats. The next day, my bench press performance was worse because I had sore lats. On any given week, I might perform 10 to 18 sets for my back, 6 to 8 for my chest, and so on, though the form was nowhere near as good as it would later become. Even back then, there were some issues with muscular recovery, but most of my recovery issues were with my CNS, my central nervous system. It was very tough for me to lift these relatively heavy weights as much as I did, but I never felt confident I was making muscular gains efficiently. While I did, of course, make gains, I developed serious muscular biases and accompanying imbalances. Quads over glutes and hamstrings, upper back over lats, chest over triceps, shoulders over triceps. I was also so fatigued. On March 20th, 2023, I deadlifted the heaviest weight I have thus far in my life. 186 kilograms. It was at the end of a series of periodic strength phases for the deadlift, which interlocked with the same for barbell squats. The next day, I bench pressed 107 kilos. This was the end of the bulk, and as I'd eventually realize, the end of my time as a power builder. Because I didn't realize how high my body fat percentage had gotten, I wound up having to cut for a lot longer than anticipated. My idea of what it should look like was just very skewed. By the time I was finally lean, I had thought, been inspired, and realized that I should train like a bodybuilder. Gone was the thought of movement patterns, maximizing load, the pursuit of maximum strength, and all that is power building. Instead, I adopted strict movements, mechanical disadvantage, and began to think in terms of muscles and muscle groups instead of movements. This was a great decision and something I really took to. I felt upset that I had trained so inefficiently, perhaps even thinking I'd done worse than I really had. I began to think that as long as I embody that amazing training style that basement bodybuilding, real name Landon, practiced, I would make gains much faster than most people and make back the time I had lost. My mindset was definitely not entirely healthy. There was also some misunderstanding. I thought Landon was performing every set to failure. I had seen him pushing himself to the limit on seated tricep pushdowns, preacher curls, and whatever else. I started training the same way. It was fine at first because almost every exercise I did, I had yet to build skill in. I was using baby weight, which quickly increased. Of course, still nowhere near enough to cause issues with my nervous system. Over time, I was able to recover from less and less. For a long time, I was performing 4 direct sets per muscle group per week, hitting each muscle group twice a week. Already, performing direct sets induces a lot more growth in the non-dominant muscles than would otherwise occur. If you perform a barbell squat where your body naturally avoids using your glutes and hamstrings much, your quads will obviously get a lot more out of those sets than your glutes and hamstrings will. Perhaps then it is no surprise that the muscles that recover the worst for me now are my glutes, my hamstrings, my lats, and my triceps. That's something I hadn't even considered until writing this script. Over time, my form has improved. No matter the exercise, unless I'm too tired to think, I'm always thinking about contracting and extending my primary mover and holding the load at the right angle to feel it where I should. The weight itself is incidental. It's just a way to limit the rep count of the exercise to something reasonable. To counteract the muscular recovery issues and stave off my frequent frustrating absences from the gym, I have experimented with drastically increased calorie intakes and reduced RPE. The calorie increase seemed to improve my performance and recovery for a while, and my measured lean mass went up significantly, but even while eating 4,000 calories, I was unable to avoid getting spun out. Same story for decreased RPE. I went for an approximate RP8 training style, but it just hasn't made a difference. In fact, while a rare few lifts have improved, most aren't ready a week later. I'm just weaker than I was before, and the lean mass gain from the high calorie intake seems to have primarily consisted of water weight. My body fat mass increased noticeably, and that has remained. That's another crazy thing. Despite all my problems, I have become substantially stronger in my lifts, and I have without a doubt gained noticeable muscle. I'm having a hard time figuring out if it's a good amount for the time I've spent, but I am gaining muscle. The question then becomes, am I training too much when I do 2 sets per muscle group once a week? Or is the RPE just too high? Will I make more gains if I just do 1 set per week, like some sort of Mensa? Or should I train at what feels like really low RPEs? You can see how I'm wary of both. Or maybe I should do 1 or 2 sets per week, but also a bunch of very low RPE mechanically advantaged stuff to burn more energy so that I can eat more and build a lot of muscle from the high stimulus to fatigue ratio stuff without getting fat. Lord knows. You can hear how the thoughts never end. You can never know for sure. I really detest not lifting. I feel so awful when I'm not lifting on a training day. I want to build mass, not sit on my ass. The thing is, I don't believe I'm some expert at lifting. My form isn't anywhere near perfection. This video is filled with training footage, so you can judge for yourself. Judging is the internet's favorite pastime, after all.
Kill yourself!
I believe that there is so much we do without realizing it that drastically impacts our lives and outcomes. To consciously seek out, discover, examine, and manipulate these behaviors is a mostly untapped avenue to as good as superpowers. Leave a comment with your thoughts. What do you think is going on and why? Did I touch upon it today, or do you think I'm missing something entirely? For the record, I keep my carb intake at 200 to 350 grams per day, and my protein intake at 200 plus, and my diet is almost entirely clean. My sleep is good most of the time, but it does tend to get interrupted.
Nice. My game's more of a soft RPG, highly thematic and a bit surreal. Don't want to plug, but you can note down Helmersoft, my game dev channel, if you want to see how it turns out. I stream often. I will definitely take a look. How jacked can I get? Yeah, I've seen I've seen your handle in my comments quite a bit for a while now.